This is a series of video tutorials that I'm going to do on scanning, saving, and editing work to print on your printer to use in your collage. So we'll start out with scanning images. A lot of times I will have imagery from books and things like that that I don't really want to cut out and use, or I want to print them on tracing paper so I can sort of have some sort of transparency uh, in order to layer a collage. So I've found myself more and more often using a scanner or searching for imagery on the internet. And I'm using this more and more along with other found ephemera. So I'm sort of adding this to the mix of collage. So what I've done is I've opened up my scanner here, and um, there's going to be a dialog box, and the dialog box is going to be very similar whether you're using a Mac or Windows. Um, some of the dialog is going to be the same. So if we look at the top here, there's an option to scan something in black and white, color, or text. In this case, I'm going to leave this at color. And colors, you have an option for billions of colors or millions of colors. If I'm printing something off to use in a collage, I'll typically choose millions. Makes the file a little bit smaller. I don't really have a need uh, to scan this in billions of colors because there's not that much color in an image that's printed on a book. It's basically CMYK. So the next thing I'm going to choose is resolution. Now this is a rather small image. It's probably 4 inches by 4 inches. So I want to scan it at a higher resolution, so that will allow me to make the image larger if I need to later on. So, and what I do is I typically choose something pretty high, not really high. 600 is fine. Um, Now the next option is um, where do I want to scan this to, or where do I want to save this to. I always save to the desktop. Um, that's you can save it to anywhere you want. If you have a folder for scans, you can scan it directly to that folder. The other option is the format. Uh, you have JPEG, TIFFs, and a few other formats. I always save everything in TIFF files. The reason why is if I were to scan this as in a JPEG file, and each time I modified that image or did something to that image and resaved it as a JPEG, it degrades the quality of the image each time. So I want to save the master image as a TIFF file. So select TIFF. Now the rest of these images you can keep the same. I do use descreening sometimes if I'm scanning something from a magazine. Uh, what the descreening does is it gets rid of the pixelation. Most everything that's printed commercially in a book is printed with CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And they're just little small dots. Now, if I'm scanning something and I'm enlarging it, I'm going to see those those dots and those colors. So if you want to get rid of that, there's some options: general, newspaper, magazine, and fine print. Um, let's just say general on this one. Everything else I'm going to keep the same. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to select the image that I want to scan. And I can go in a little tight here. And then I'm going to select scan. Now by choosing the 600 DPI, it's going to scan a little slower. And of course the descreening makes it scan a little slower too because it has to go back and rescan and then descreen. You should always use descreen if you're using any type of imagery from a magazine, and you're planning on enlarging that. Um, it just sort of blends those dots together, makes for a more pleasing image. Now, of course, if you wanted, that those dots, in some cases that could be quite effective in using those. Now, once it's scanned, I can close out of my scanner. And if you notice, it put the image on the desktop. And a lot of times I'll rename this so it's a little easier when I'm looking for imagery later on, so I can actually find it, what I'm looking for. Um, I'll call this one Fighting Birds. Select Enter. Um, Now I'll make another video tutorial on editing this image, so stay tuned for that.